All right, it is day 3 of the transformation journey. We're gonna hop right into it, man, and share a little bit from my time in the Word today. Again, I'm in Psalms, and I'm just gonna read Psalm chapter the 8th Psalm, verses 3 through 5. It says, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him?" And then verse 5 says, "Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings, and crowned him with glory and honor." And when I read that, man, I think that there's 3 responses that we should have to a passage like that. Like the first being God. Like God created the heavens. He created the moon and the stars. He created earth and man and all life and all things in existence for himself. And so off top is just, I personally as an artist, I just like acknowledging the creative majesty of God, right? And so just giving him glory first and foremost. Second is that as mankind, we should be humbled. We should be humbled by the fact, I mean, that's the point that the psalmist, that the author of that psalm is making, is that the God of all creation, out of all his living creatures, out of everything that he's made in the vast universe, he considers us, mankind, he made us just lower than the angels, just lower than the heavenly beings, and he cares for us. He has thoughts towards us. Of everything in this vast, infinite universe, well, technically he is alone is infinite, but in this vast universe, he cares for little old me, right? So like, that's humbling to know that in fact we are such a small part of everything he's created. But then the third response is that, man, we should feel so dignified. Like, in that same token, that same vein, this very creative, very majestic, powerful, infinite God declares us as valuable, as worthy. And that's something, man, that gives every human being dignity, right? We're created in the image of God. We're all image bearers of God. That means every single human being has value. And we are cared for by the God of the universe. And so those 3 responses, and I want to follow that up with later on in Psalm 8, actually the next verse, Psalm 8 verse 6 says, "You have given him," talking about man, God has given man dominion, a rulership, authority over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet. In other words, God has given man the responsibility, the authority to rule over his creation on earth. And it's crazy, like, how evident it is that we have failed, right? That mankind has failed in our stewardship, in our management of planet Earth, but not only that, and we've desperately failed in our relationship with one another. Like, dominion doesn't just mean ruling over everything like a tyrant, but we're all in this together, and yet it's each other that we try to rule over, and people are oppressed, right? And though we should have this dignity and respect for one another, in light of the fact that we're all created in God's image, that we are highly valued and cared for by the God of the universe, and yet we see racism, we see violence against our fellow men and women, we see sexism, we see all of these things that essentially point to a mismanagement in the glory and power and responsibility that God has given us. And man, in this transformation process, right? The spiritual and the physical. Pain and what we see in this world, as I was kind of talking about yesterday as well. I mean, we can't really escape it in these times, and I think it's good to address it, but not only to address it, but to look at everything in light of Scripture, right? And so it's interesting that the next 5 Psalms, right? Psalm 9, especially 9 and 10, but all the way up through 14, which is where my reading schedule stopped today. Psalms 9 through 14, if you read Psalm 9, it's like the psalmist is praising God for how he defends the poor, how he brings justice upon the oppressor and stands up for the oppressed, right? And it's all about God's judgment. And in the very next Psalm, Psalm 10, the psalmist is complaining. He's looking around at all the wickedness and how the wicked prosper and all the unrighteousness and how it seems like they get away with everything, and yet the righteous and the poor just are left hanging, right? And the psalmist is like, where are you at, God? Like, we need you right now. And it's that author, that psalmist having an honest moment with God. And I just want to, like, I'm reminded, and I want to remind you that, like, we can have those honest moments. We don't always have to have the right answer and come to God with, like, this Christianese prayer. Like, we can be ugly honest with God if we're hurting, if we see our fellow men and women being oppressed and judgment is not taking place. Like, we can have that honest ugly prayer with God. He's not offended by that. It's in His Word. And I want to challenge you, yes, you, to read at least Psalm 9 and Psalm 10. And really, I encourage you to read Psalm 9 through 14, the whole chapters, right? Especially if you're one that is feeling like, where is God in all of this craziness, right? And you know that we are created to have dignity because God created us, but yet it's hard to see. I challenge you to read Psalms 9 through 14, at least Psalm 9 and 10, and look at the ugly honesty, and yet look at the conclusion that the psalmist comes to as well. And it's not always straightforward, but we know that ultimately God will bring justice upon the wicked. But in the meantime, man, remember that God is to be praised. He's glorious and majestic. Remember that we should be humble, knowing that of all of God's creation, He cares for us. And then we should walk with dignity, walk with your head up, knowing that, yes, God created us to be glory, to represent Him, and to rule in a way that reflects His glory. So, hey, I'm about to hit this day 3 with the Jillian Michaels workout, and keeping it moving, man. God bless.